December 28th, 1956, Brighton Park, Chicago. A cold winter evening that would mark the beginning of one of Chicago's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Two sisters, Barbara Grimes, 15, and Patricia Grimes, who was just days away from turning 13, headed out to catch a movie. They were huge Elvis Presley fans, and this would be their 11th time watching Love Me Tender at the Brighton Theatre. Their mother, Loretta, gave them $2.50 for tickets and snacks. The clock struck 7:30 p.m. as they left their home. What happened next would spark one of Cook County's largest missing persons searches in history. The girls were last seen at the theatre's concession stand by their friend Dorothy Wynett, who spotted them getting snacks between showings. They seemed perfectly fine, just two sisters enjoying their favorite movie. But when 11:45 p.m. came and went with no sign of the girls, their mother began to worry. By 2 a.m., after calling friends and sending siblings to check local bus stops, Loretta contacted the police. What followed was unprecedented. 300,000 people questioned, 2,000 subjected to detailed interrogation, and the FBI joining the investigation after ransom notes started arriving. Even Elvis Presley himself got involved, making public pleas for the girls to return home if they were listening. But the truth was far more sinister than anyone imagined. On January 22, 1957, Leonard Prescott was driving along German Church Road in Willow Springs when he spotted something that would haunt him forever. What he initially thought was a mannequin turned out to be the naked bodies of Barbara and Patricia dumped by the roadside. The investigation that followed produced three main suspects: Walter Kranz, a 53-year-old who claimed psychic knowledge of where the bodies would be found; Edward Benny Bedwell, a drifter who initially confessed but was later cleared when his story didn't match the evidence; and Max Fleeg, a 17-year-old with a violent history who allegedly confessed during a polygraph but couldn't be tied to the crime. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case came months after the murders. Loretta received a phone call from a man claiming to be the killer. He knew a detail that hadn't been released to the public. Patricia's toes were crossed when her body was found. The caller laughed and hung up. Today, over 68 years later, the case remains unsolved. Barbara and Patricia Grimes joined the tragic list of victims whose killers were never brought to justice. Their parents, Joseph and Loretta, passed away in 1965 and 1989 respectively, never knowing who took their daughters that cold December night. But what really happened to Barbara and Patricia that night? Let's examine the possibilities based on the evidence. Some investigators believed the girls may have accepted a ride from someone they knew. Remember that witness report about seeing them get into a Mercury with two men? This could explain why there were no signs of struggle at the initial scene. The girls might have trusted their killer, perhaps someone from their neighborhood who knew their routine. The medical examiner's finding that they died within 5 hours of leaving home suggests something happened that very night, not days later, as some suspects claimed. The lack of obvious trauma but presence of certain injuries points to a possible scenario where they died from exposure but were handled roughly either before or after death. The mysterious caller who knew about Patricia's crossed toes adds another layer. Only someone who had close contact with the bodies would have known this detail. Was this the killer attempting to claim credit? Consider these key points. The bodies were found far from their neighborhood. The timing of death suggests quick action. The location by a guardrail indicates local knowledge. The taunting calls suggest a perpetrator who wanted recognition. The most likely scenario, someone local, someone who knew the area well enough to find German Church Road in the dark. Someone who might have watched the girls' routine of going to the movies. Someone who was bold enough to approach two teenagers, but careful enough to leave minimal evidence. Could the killer still be alive today? Given the timeline, if they were young at the time, it's possible. And with advancing DNA technology and cold case techniques, there's always hope for answers. While we may never know the full truth of what happened to Barbara and Patricia Grimes that winter night, their story reminds us that some mysteries refuse to stay buried in the past. Their case continues to raise questions, spark theories, and remind us that somewhere, someone might still hold the key to solving this decades-old tragedy. What do you think happened to the Grimes sisters? Share your theories in the comments below, but remember, behind every true crime story are real victims and families who deserve our respect. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to join us next time as we explore more unsolved mysteries from the past.